And, well, joining me in studio or with me in studio is Professor Wajakoya and Barack Muluka. And in case you're joining us now, welcome aboard. We'd like to look at the role of institutions. Now, we do know that the budget is going to be read on Thursday, and many Kenyans wait with bated breath for this day because it has, well, mostly been negative for Kenyans, given the fact that when there's a tax rise, when there's rises in prices, then it obviously means we're left out of pocket. But we'd like to concentrate and look at the role of institutions. For instance, we have Parliament, which is supposed to ensure that Kenyans have a more enviable environment to live in. And gentlemen, we'll start off with looking at some of the institutions. We'll look at the budget cuts that have been proposed so far. But let's start with the role of institutions, and I'll start with you, Barack Muluka, on the National Assembly. When it comes to controlling our way of living in terms of expenditure, in terms of what we should expect, have Parliament played their role?
Before we even get there, I'd like to ask, have the rest of us played our role? Because the budget-making process in this country is participatory. And that is a constitution. There's also the Public Finance Act that we are all supposed to participate. And we are invited by the Treasury because we can already see which direction the budget making process, or rather the budget that is going to be presented in the National Assembly is going. The question is, have we participated? And the answer is that no, we have abdicated our responsibility. I was here with this team last Tuesday when we were talking about the political opposition in the country. I pointed out that we at the ANC had raised the red flag on the capital gains tax, which we haven't had any robust debates on. We thought that the media was going to pick that up and talk about it, contextualize it within the Big Four agenda, particularly look at the housing component, that here we are talking about 20% capital gains tax. If you are going to sell land, 20% of the proceeds will go towards government. We talked about the expansion of the income tax brackets. Of course, they say if you are earning up to about 750,000 shillings per month, it will be 35%. And we know that those brackets are very narrow. There are very few who are fitting in them. And we expect that it's going to be expanded in the fullness of time to cover everybody else. Just the same way the present 30% was done. We have not engaged in debate. And I keep on saying, as a journalist, that media in this country fails absolutely in the role of agenda setting, even in the role of editorializing, creating debate, around which the national psyche then gravitates, and we can discuss serious issues which affect us. But we don't do that. We are fixated with one or two politicians, journalists who are faking things. I've read, for example, some very interesting things in the Daily Nation. I mentioned that.
Regarding your party.
Regarding my party and myself.
And the fact that you've disagreed with your party leader.
Disagreed with my party leader, that I have called for dissolution of NASA. Ask those journalists, where did Muluka say this? Who was there? When? What was the context? You will be shocked to discover that none of these people can contextualize that and say Muluka issued a press statement or he addressed a rally or her. So that is where we are.
That's where we are.
Following trivia. And therefore, when this thing gets into Parliament, 60% of the people there do not even begin understanding what it is about. And maybe we cannot even blame them because they are not necessarily authorities in finance and public finance. But that spells the full dimension of our dilemma.
All right, Professor, your thoughts and opening comments on the role of institutions. Basically, Barack has mentioned that we as Kenyans have not played our role, of course, blaming the media, but I'll come to that in a bit. But your thoughts on whether it really is the Kenyan to blame or the institutions that we've put in place, because we go to the polls every 5 years to elect leaders that we expect are going to do exactly that, lead us. Have they led us to where we are today?
First of all, before I answer that question, I can see the story here on page 5 by David Mwere. This journalist should be investigated as to the source of the information. Otherwise, these are
that will throw us off. But
yeah, that's the gutter. Yeah. But let me come to your question. Yes, Parliament has a role as stipulated in the Constitution. What I have not seen, and what I've not seen for the last 4 years is what are they doing with businesses? What are they doing with tax brackets to attract investors to come in this country and do the investment? The Parliamentary Committee on Taxation or Treasury, what have you. In the US, for example, if you look at the state of Delaware passed legislation to attract companies to come and invest in Delaware by giving them tax rebates so that they can come in, invest, but then they can also get tax rebates back. And that's one source of companies sourcing the government taxes by actually coming in and opening up employment opportunities, production opportunities for the viability of the economy. In this country, what the Parliament is obsessed with is how do we increase taxes and how do we slash taxes? Who gives them that monopoly? The preamble of the Constitution has the physiology of we the people. And as Barack Muluka has said, issues of participatory or by epistolary are issues that are constituted, whereby if you want to tax me, talk to me about that tax. Come into what Raila spoke of the other day of community orientation, community-based discussion where people can have town hall meetings to chart their way forward when it comes to monetary issues that affect them. Here, we have never had even the Minister for Treasury or Minister in charge of Finance going outside there, talking to Kenyans, or those ministers in charge of county treasury or finance, going out there and assembling people to speak about their future. Now, when it comes now to Parliament coming in and talking of increasing taxes, not looking into the common man on the street and finding out whether this common man can be given tax rebates, not looking at companies or corporations that come to invest and come up with some kind of tax rebates, then we have issues here.
Okay, I'd want us to look at some of the figures as predicted to what we're expecting the budget to look like and some of the proposed budget slashes. And Barack, I'll come to you because you've said that we've not given a platform yet. We're discussing this. So media, I think, is doing their job. I mean, we're here discussing this right now. The opportunity is there.
We have failed, but I'll come back to that.
You'll come back to that. But I'd also like to find out what is it that you would do different. But let's look at those figures. And we have some slashes. For instance, if we look at spending cuts, there's 8.3 billion NYS budget for State Department slashed by a third. We do know that the NYS basically has been, let's just call it a cesspit of a gravy train, as it were. There's been a lot of money that has been lost right there. And that's proposed that 8.3 billion be slashed from the NYS. Question is, where is it going to be put? And looking at other spending cuts also 5 billion to be removed from the pension fund. Again, where does that money go? We also have 2 billion Naivasha Industrial Park to be, put into the Naivasha Industrial Park. These are just proposed figures, which we expect might be, floated out on Thursday. Spending cuts are also 215 million on TSC budget, the Teacher Service Commission. Then we also have extra allocated cash, 8.7 billion on repair of damages caused by floods, 8.7 billion on repairs of damages caused by floods. One, of course, would probably want that to be done the other way around. Rather than repair, why don't we have efficient systems that ensure that there's no destruction? Extra cash allocated, we also have 3.8 billion CDF programs. Members of Parliament sponsor. This is likely to go through if it is proposed, of course, given that members of Parliament would probably want more in their kitty. All right, so 1.5 billion LPG cylinders for low and middle income groups. Those are just some of the proposed figures. So let me come to you, Barak Muluka, on your thoughts on these and possibly what, well, they say that the opposition is government in waiting. What is it that you'd have done different?
You see, first, when you look at NYS, NYS is the mother of all scams in this country, particularly now going through what we are experiencing. It is scandalous that anybody should still be talking about pumping more billions into NYS. We should be talking about completely shaking up NYS, rethinking it. It was a good and noble idea, yes, but we can't see it serving the purpose which it was meant for, unless, of course, it's about stealing. You look at TSC. TSC is about employing more teachers. And yes, instead of just having youth there going to West, more of them should be being trained and prepared, including for positions and roles like teaching. We are aware that we need several tens of thousands of teachers in high school, in primary schools. One would want to see a lot more going there. Then you want to look at the infrastructure, look at the dilapidated state of infrastructure in this country. Look at Nairobi, which is supposed to be the foremost metropolis in Eastern and Central Africa, and which has got now craters virtually everywhere. You're not seeing any useful movement there. Then you want to talk about the health sector. I was telling you gentlemen off camera a little while back, I've got very personal experience. My daughter, who is an obstetrician gynecologist and who is bonded by the Kenya government, having taken her postgraduate degree from the University of Nairobi, graduated a couple of years back, is not able to find placement. And there are many others like her who graduated before her, who graduated after her, postgraduate training consultant in this country. They cannot get employment in government. The same government is saying that we have bonded you for 4 years. That kind of contradictory situation.
Yet we're bringing in doctors from Cuba.
Yes, you're bringing in doctors from Cuba, and I sometimes get completely scandalized. I hope my teacher and friend, Governor Professor Anyang' Nyong'o, is watching. He's listening, and I'll pick this up with him at another level. It is scandalous when he's the one who is taken to KIE to go and rationalize these things. Professor Anyang' Nyong'o would remember that in 1981 at the University of Nairobi, he was getting arrested. And we, the students, were pouring into the streets of Nairobi to protest. And he was getting arrested because of the way the government was mistreating the doctors in this country. And it's a pity that those of us who have in the past been on the other side are now crossing over, and we become the apologists of this kind of
that kind of system. Professor, there's definitely something has to shift, because with the rising debt that we have and the taxation that the amount of tax that Kenyans pay, which is among the highest in the world, taking it higher does not necessarily mean we're, one, going to pay that debt, or two, get out of that vicious cycle. However, we have institutions in place that have been placed to ensure that these things don't happen. Where do we need to go from here?
Let's look into the eye of privatization. of infrastructure so that we can create competition and then shift the accountability to the private eye. Secondly, if you look at the European markets or European governments and institutions that are actually detailed by European Parliament, you'll find out that issues of floods are non-issues because farmers and those affected are subsidized, and they're also requested to take insurance in case of any calamities arising. Now, if you can allocate that kind of money to compensate for those who have been involved or who have been affected by floods, then that should actually ring a bell. What do we do to contain such situations so that we don't overspend in future? Let's go into the whims of sustainable development and economic development in terms of curbing up that kind of problem. A European farmer is subsidized whenever there is a calamity, so that he's actually given an incentive to develop in his methods of farming, be it dairy farming, be it farming produce for the readily available market. Now, as my brother Muluka has said on issues of like the potholes we have in Nairobi, Nairobi is already overburdened. Let us shift this capital, and we shall not be the first ones to shift the capital. We can.
You mean like physically move it to another?
Let's come up with new ideas and technology to actually build.
To remove pressure from
Nairobi, yes.
CBD. Mm-hmm.
Tanzania has done it. They shifted to Dodoma. Nigeria shifted to Abuja. Why can't we shift this capital to a place like Isiolo, or let me say Nakuru or Eldoret, so that we can make Nairobi an industrial city? Now, when it comes to issues of teachers, why can't we privatize that area so that we can actually minimize the costs of paying for inflated kind of monies that people have not actually participated from?
Okay, and Barak, there are a barrage of ideas of how we can improve our economy. However, they never seem to get to the top. What is the bottleneck? What is it that stops our leadership from having some of these ideas implemented? And is the pressure from the government end so that at least we have a reasonable growth in economy? And secondly, our taxes don't have to keep going up every single year that we read the budget.
Agenda setting. And I come back again to the media. And Mike, I'd like you to understand, and the viewers as well, that when I talk about the media, I don't just speak as an outsider. I'm myself a journalist. I keep reminding us by training, examination, qualification, that we have got a primary role because we are one of the barometers of and vehicles of national dialogue and conversation. What kind of agenda do we set for this country? We set very trivial agenda, and we will keep on pursuing certain individuals and ensuring that the smallest and the most trivial thing that they are doing is what the public psyche is focused upon. We ought to be the ones who are drawing in everybody and making this the focus of conversation in this country. That, as Professor Ajakoya and myself have pointed out, we are having problems with the infrastructure within the city of Nairobi and elsewhere in the country. How have we positioned that as an agenda? Today in this country, as we sit here this morning, we have got an outbreak of Rift Valley fever, where citizens in this country are already dead. Last year we had about 250. Already they are running into a couple of dozens in Wajir. We have not discussed this. What are the causes? How do we deal with it? Foreign journalists are addressing it. You hear it on the BBC, you hear it on the CNN. You don't see anything about it within the country. So it is ourselves. And as we do that, we will be able to separate the grain from the chaff the politicians who are not able to wrap their minds around these issues will be able to be marginalized and get where they belong and be pushed away from the heart of activities, the national heartbeat in politics, in the economy, and we start going somewhere.
All right, Professor, one of the other areas that is proposed to have budget cuts is the judiciary. Is that sinking ourselves deeper into trouble, given that the judges would also be struggling possibly to have health care or insurance on their health care?
You know, I don't know what to say, and as I said before, and I'll still repeat it, even if it means breaking the law, I'm ready to go to jail. Trust me, when you touch on judiciary,
yes,
you are touching at the heart of the nation. When they are cutting monies aimed for judiciary, have they consulted the Chief Justice? Have they consulted the lawyers? Have they picked up the views and involved the lawyers in that participation? Have they consulted Kenyans in general who are affected by what comes out of judiciary?
What would we be risking by having a budget cut on the judiciary?
Corruption. We already have corruption in the judiciary. That's true for fact, where some judges are known to take bribes or are suspected to take bribes.
But giving the money has not solved the problem. And corruption, I think, is a conversation we need to change in terms of it's a choice.
It's not only a choice. It's a cancer. It should be considered as a national disaster. It's actually something that should be constituted within the law, either legalize corruption or consider it as a disaster.
You know, Mike and Prof, the judiciary is easily the most reformed institution in this country. Perhaps the only reformed institution in Kenya today is the judiciary. It's the last firewall in the war against corruption and in all that bedevils our nation. And we know that the judiciary keeps on running into problems with the political class because of its exercise of independence, to the extent that when it witnesses what it considers to be a flawed presidential election, it does not shy away from nullifying and invalidating that election. The judiciary needs more funds to be able to set up more courts and bring justice closer to the people. You don't have to travel so far away to be able to reach a court. The judiciary needs to employ more judges, more magistrates, more judicial officers. And we are aware that from time to time we have seen people, the leader of a majority in parliament, telling them, we are going to slash down your budget as a way of punishing you for your independence. We have seen the Speaker of the National Assembly railing against the judiciary, and I think that that is the one institution that we can hardly afford to fool around with.
All right, as we wind up, Professor, what is your expectation of the budget? Because there is what should be the expectation, but there is what is the reality. What is the expectation of the budget, which is going to be read in 2 days, and what should Kenyans brace themselves for?
Kenyans should not pay taxes.
They will pay. They will pay.
And they will pay. And as a lawyer, I would expect that you would not be pushing for something that is illegal.
Well, what is illegal when everything is illegal?
There are institutions in place that are supposed to take care of
Professor, why should I be talking like a fool on national television before millions of people trying to speak on things and covering up facts? When these guys have been stealing, we are not addressing issues on how to return that money and cut taxes.
It is a fact that they have been stealing. It is a fact, yes, that there is wanton corruption, but not paying taxes does not help.
Well, he should go beyond words.
My friend.
He should begin walking the talk. By being the first one
not to pay taxes.
And being the first one to go out and mobilize against...
Unfortunately, I don't do things like a marketer. A woman who's selling potatoes and pointing fingers. I don't do that. I speak them, and I speak truthfully.
So are you saying that you,
what I'm saying is, and it could be, right now we can speak what we want. But go to a Kenyan today, ask him, would you like to pay taxes? Do a random selection of 20 Kenyans. 9 to 10 to 12 will tell you we don't. Why? Because there is justification. Why can the government issue statements on how they are going to bring back this money that has been stolen by politicians? And as you correctly said, Duale came out and said, and I'm now talking on judiciary, and these are my parting shots. He said, we shall punish the judiciary. He went to the same judiciary, and after winning his case, his petition, he was full of praises of judiciary. Why should judges and why should the courts suffer just because of their reform agenda? I mean, this talk is good. It's nice and juicy when you speak this way, but trust me,
all right.
Kenyans are fed up. They are fed up, and they are fed up because of corruption.
Let's get to the factual bit of it. What should Kenyans expect out of the budget?
Well, I don't want to comment on that one.
All right, Barak?
There are two ways of looking at it, what we would wish for and the reality that we are going to see. One of the things is that we would wish to see some relief coming out of the budget. There will be none, unfortunately, which gives us the truthful perspective that things are just going to become tighter. Life is going to become a lot more harsher. And I just wish, like the good gentleman says, that we could do something to curb, if not to arrest completely, the corruption that we see out there. You talked about independent institutions. We have got the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission. Every so often you will hear them saying that we have recovered so many hundreds of billions. They never tell us where they have recovered them from, who the thieves were, and what is being done to them. And they have become one more burden to the country. So in a nutshell, each time you hear that they are going to give us the financial estimates, we just know that they're telling us that life is going to be a lot more rougher for you. So tighten your belt if you have one.
All right, thank you, gentlemen. We'll have to wind it up right there, Professor Wajakoya and Barak Muluka. Basically, that's a political point. And, well, the budget is going to be ready in another 2 days. And we can only wait as Kenyans for what is in that briefcase, the famous briefcase that is carried from, or rather that is carried into Parliament and basically has that. For now, we're going to take a short break. This is Morning Express. Do stay with us. We have more coming up.